This video is going to talk about the application of the discriminant. The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. That should look familiar because it's under the radical of the quadratic formula, which you mastered in the last section. There's a lot of information on this slide, so take a moment to jot everything down. So pause the video, jot everything down. So make sure you get the inequalities here, the number of solutions that correspond with the inequalities, and the number of x-intercepts, along with a quick sketch of these graphs. So take a moment, hit pause, and jot this down in your notebook. All right, let me just take a second to walk through the notes and everything you just jotted down. So if the discriminant, if b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, then that's going to tell you that the quadratic formula, or the quadratic equation, I should say, is going to generate two solutions, which means you will have two x-intercepts. So if you look down here at each of these graphs, which one of these graphs, if you take a second to think about it, has two x-intercepts? I hope you're thinking this graph does. And the two x-intercepts would be right here and right there. Now, if b squared minus 4ac equals 0, then that's going to tell you that that quadratic equation will generate one solution, which means we will have one x-intercept. So again, if we look at the graphs, which one of these remaining graphs has an x-intercept? So hopefully you notice that it's this one. So there's one x-intercept right there. Okay, and lastly, if the discriminant b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, then that means that quadratic formula equation will give you 0 solutions, which means you'll have 0 x-intercepts. So that will look, if we graphed it, it would look like this last equation, where no part of the parabola goes through or touches the x-axis. Now we're going to use that information to look at quadratic equations and determine the value of the discriminant, which is going to tell us how many solutions that quadratic equation will have. It's also going to tell us the number of x-intercepts in the equation as well. So the first thing we need to do is identify A, B, and C. So the first thing I want to point out here in question number 1 is that it's solve for 0. That's an absolute must. So when you're looking at these equations and you're identifying A, B, and C, you need to make sure your quadratic equation is in standard form. From here, you can read A, B, and C. So A is 1, B is 2, and C is 1. From here, we're going to plug those values into b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to do 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 1, because A and C are both 1. So 2 squared is 4, minus 4 times 1 is 4. So in this case, my discriminant is 0. That tells me that there are going to be only one solution to the quadratic equation. This doesn't tell me that the solution is 0 to the quadratic equation. It is just telling me that there'll only be one solution. So I'm going to use the discriminant and the table you just jotted down to tell you how many solutions there will be. Okay, now I'm going to look at equation number 2. So again, I have to identify A, B, and C. A is 1, and in this case, I don't have an x term, so that means B is 0, and C, my constant, is 4. So again, I'm going to take this information and substitute it into b squared minus 4ac. So I'll get 0 squared minus 4 times A times C. So I'm going to get 0 minus 16, which is negative 16. Okay, again, this is not the solution to the quadratic formula, but using this information with the discriminant, it's going to tell you, because the discriminant is negative, that there are no solutions. Which also means there are no x-intercepts. All right, let's look at our third equation. All right, our third equation here. So again, I have to identify A, B, and C. Now, if I look at this equation, it's not in standard form. So I have to subtract 5 on both sides of my equation. So I'll get x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, I'm going to identify A, B, and C now that it's in standard form. And I'm going to give myself a little more room here. All right, A is 1, B is 4, C is negative 5. Okay, so when I substitute those values again into B squared minus 4AC, I'll get 4 squared minus 4 times A times C. So I'll get 16 plus 20. I got the plus because this is a negative 4 times negative 5 times 1, which will give me 20. So when I add these up, I'm going to get 36. So this, because this is positive, is going to tell me that there are going to be 2 solutions. So I'll have 2 solutions, which means I'll also have 2 x-intercepts. So now, any of these equations, if I were to plug them into the quadratic formula, I know in my first equation here, this is not going to generate 2 solutions. This is going to generate only 1 solution because my discriminant is 0. My second equation, the discriminant is negative. So that tells me I'm not going to get any solutions when I plug this equation into the quadratic formula. I'm also not going to have any x-intercepts. And then lastly, we just talked about this one most recent, when I plug this information for this quadratic equation into the quadratic formula, I am going to get 2 solutions and 2 x-intercepts. Again, the discriminant, just to wrap up, does not tell you what the solutions are. It simply tells you how many solutions and how many x-intercepts you will get.